Hey guys, coming at you today with a story 23 years in the making. Since I was 16, I have been in the restaurant business of some kind, and somehow I ended up here. I'm gonna try to keep this short, but a lot happened in the beginning of my career that I think probably shaped most of the rest of my life. So I wrote down all the things that happened until I was about 22, and it's a lot. So I'm gonna try to not make it super long-winded, but you might want to get a cup of coffee, a beverage, a snack, because it might be a little long. And of course a train. I've always lived near trains my entire life. Not great for a YouTuber. So as a child, I always watched the Food Network. That was pretty much the only thing I ever watched. And this was before all the reality TV shows and stuff went on. It was very much just a lot of different kinds of cooking shows, and I loved it. So I went to culinary school in high school. It was a BOCES program, and I did that for 2 years. I went half the day my junior and senior year of high school. Plus, in my senior year, I didn't have a lot of extra classes to take because I literally did no extra education. So I even took like cooking classes as extras in my senior year of high school too. So I took a lot of culinary just in high school. And then I fell in love with the cake decorating unit that we had in school. So I was like, I want to go into the pastry arts. And my mom's like, you should really just do culinary. You can get both of them. I'm like, no, I don't like enough food because ever since I was young, was a picky eater. I'm better now. So like, I did not want to go into culinary because I knew I would have to eat everything that I was making. So I went to school specifically for pastry arts. And I didn't understand a lot. Like, I really feel like our education system is lacking in student loan education and debt and all that stuff. Like, I took a certificate course. I didn't even get like an associate's degree. I was only there for 6 months and paid, the tuition itself was $36,000 or something, but with all the interest on it, I was paying it until I was like 35. And I didn't even have a degree to show for it. So at the last minute, I said I wanted to stay local and go to a community college, but I ended up going to Connecticut Culinary in Suffield, Connecticut. And I went and toured a bunch of colleges, but my dream, ever since my mom took me on an Alaskan cruise when I was 16, was to work on a cruise ship, because the dessert buffet on this cruise was amazing. Chocolate sculptures and just edible art everywhere. And I've always loved art and done art in some form or another. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the pastry arts. So Connecticut Culinary had recruits that would come from Norwegian to hire people from school. So that's one of the main reasons I chose the Connecticut Culinary. To graduate pastry school, I had to get an externship, which is basically an internship, but technically it's supposed to be paid. And you had to have like forms filled out by the employer and stuff like that, send it into the school to graduate from college. So Norwegian came to the school recruiting for working on the cruise ships, and I interviewed with them. I was told I was hired. And then when school ended, I didn't hear anything from Norwegian Cruise Lines. So I was scrambling. I'm like, I need an externship to finish college. And the counselors at the school are supposed to like help you get into a job. But because I was in Connecticut, it was only like an hour from Boston, an hour from New York City, like all these like big cities. And that's where they had their connections for like externships. They had nothing for Buffalo, New York. So if I was going home, I had to find my own externship. I was too scared to just like, yeah, I'm gonna find an apartment in New York City and go work in New York City for however long. In hindsight, it probably would have been a good thing for me to just take the leap and do it, but I didn't, and I went back home to here, Buffalo, New York. And this was before even smartphones. So when I got home, I Google mapped on my computer all the bakeries in Buffalo and went on like a road trip all the way through, stopping at each one to like hand in an application or fill out an application or talk to whoever I could, you know, to try to get an externship so I didn't fail college. And I got really nothing, like no one was really looking for help. And finally my mom knew somebody that owned a really small bakery that did their own breads and some pastries and stuff like that. They didn't need anybody, but I went to work there for free just so I didn't fail college, basically. She filled out a form, you know, by the deadline, I was able to get something at least. And then I finally heard back from the cruise line. And apparently the recruiter that hired me left, and it took a long time for a new recruiter to get a hold of everybody that, you know, was supposed to be getting a hold of to have these externships. So I went to work for Norwegian Cruise Lines. And my dreams were pretty much dashed. Because the cruise that I had went on with my mom was an international cruise ship. The ones that we were getting hired for were American flag ships. So like you had to be a US citizen in order to work on the cruise, and they had to pay us American wages. This can be a very long story. I'm gonna try not to go into it too much, but we brought out a brand new ship. So this ship, it docked in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, where I was at training to be a merchant mariner, to be on the cruise ship. They picked us up in Maryland, took us all the way around the US. We stopped in California, they christened the ship, and then it went down to Hawaii, where that was the route it was gonna take every week with new passengers. So I asked basically when we got to Hawaii, like, so are we gonna do the chocoholic buffet like, you know, all the other Norwegian cruise lines? And basically I got told, we don't have money for that. And it turned out that maybe not quite half of the products, but a lot of the products were frozen, and they only had so much budget to make like fresh gourmet pastries and stuff like that. And so my dreams were kind of dashed in that aspect. Plus, this was my first time working under like a head pastry chef, you know, or any kind of chef. Like I was working at Bob Evans. It was just, you know, the usual managers and stuff like that. But he wasn't the nicest of people, trying to put it nicely. But he was basically super condescending and treated me like garbage. Like he'd tell me to make something and there'd be no instructions on his recipes. It would just be like lists of ingredients blocked out in grams, and he would just say, make this. And I didn't know the procedures on it. And every time I'd ask him a question, he'd say, how much did you pay for school again? And it was really defeating to like finally be at this place that, you know, I wanted to be, and then it turning out to be kind of not all it was cracked up to be. And also there was no days off for 6 months. I was on the cruise ship. Luckily, I didn't even have a whole like tour because we brought out a new ship. So for a couple of weeks, we didn't even have passengers, but I lived below deck, like on the second level of the ship, and the pastry shop was on the third level. So I had no sunlight ever. So basically I spent my time up on the mooring deck, which is what was our smoking area and stuff like that. And it was just not a healthy environment at all for me. I got sick every month, and it got progressively worse every month. And by my last month, I was in bed, not able to move for like 3 days. And then they told me, if you don't go back to work, we're sending you home. So I went to work. And I don't remember that day at all because I was so brain fogged that I was just going through motions and not really even comprehending what was going on. It was bad. Yeah, so the ship, I don't recommend it. I mean, there's some people that were on there that were like lifers, they're called. You know, you do 6 months on, 2 months off, you go back, do 6 more months, 2 months off, and they love it because they don't have to worry about anything else. But living in a room, tiny room, 2 bunk beds with 3 other people in a tiny space underneath the ocean, not for me. So from there, when I got home, I went back to trying to find a pastry job. I ended up going into a grocery store, and they had like a little, like, it looked like an ATM almost, but it was like a little computer screen where you like filled out an application or whatever. And they were actually looking for somebody for the bakery. And so I'm like, oh, awesome. So I took the job, and they're like, yeah, the cake decorator really, you know, could use some help. And I'm like, awesome. That's what I want to do. I want to decorate cakes. And You'll see a recurring theme here. The cake decorator wanted nothing to do with me and did not want me anywhere near her stuff. So I was hired and basically ended up being the bakery closer. So I didn't even bake anything. I packaged all the old baked goods, cleaned the bakery, and did all the people's dishes from the night before. And like, I took care of a couple customers that would come up that wanted bread sliced or maybe their name written on a cake or something like that. But literally I was a glorified cleaner. And so I didn't stay there very long. And luckily, all my jobs throughout this time had pretty much been through friends. So my friend got me a job at a coffee shop where they're like, yeah, the woman that does the baking could really use some extra help because, you know you're baking and, you'll be able to help her out a lot. I'm like, awesome, great. Again, she wanted nothing to do with me. And she was very territorial about her stuff and how things were done. So I really did not help much with the baking. I worked night shifts, so it was finish this pie or just bake off the frozen baked goods that we need for the case or pull out frozen baked goods that we need for the case. So again, not really a pastry job in general. I was mostly making coffees, sandwiches, doing dishes. Sometimes I'd run the register, run food, stuff like that. Typical cafe, but it was a family owned. And I still talk to them now. Like, I went back to work for them a couple of times, but never in the baking aspect. Just like, I need some extra cash. I'm gonna go work for their, a couple hours a week. But my friend still, she went back to work for them too. At this point, I'm only 19, almost 20 years later. So it is 20 years later. Oh God, I'm gonna be 39 soon. And at the same time, it was a part-time gig. Same thing with another part-time job at a bakery that a friend was just working the counter at. They needed like a bakery prep person. So I went to work for a bakery in downtown Buffalo that had actually been around for a long time, but it had been taken over by different owners. So I went to work there and basically I did some baking there. Like I'd make scones, I'd make pastry hearts, I'd frost cookies, but a lot of times it was batch making cakes, freezing those, which this job really helped me in the bulk baking area. It was really the only job that I had where I was making 10 cakes at a time, big batches of cookie dough, and like scooping and portioning, freezing to bake later. Like it taught me a lot about how to set up a bakery, which is a lot of the stuff I do in this bakery is from that job 20 years ago. So I do appreciate having that job, but it was part-time for one. Second, being downtown and trying to get there at 8 in the morning and finding parking because there's no parking lots and it's pay to park or you got to find a side street and walk to the place. It wasn't the best area and the easiest to get to, but also some stuff was going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. And the head pastry chef that was there, he had been there since the previous owners and he left. There was apparently some fraud between them, like the new owners taking money and stuff like that. Like I found all this out way later, but I knew something was up because sometimes my checks would bounce or she'd say not to cash them yet and stuff like that. So I knew things were happening. I just didn't know the extent of it at the time. And I was only 19. I didn't know what the hell was going on half the time. But I ended up looking for another job because I knew that that place wasn't going to be successful much longer. And I was right. I think like 2 years later, they closed, something like that. But there was one pastry job on Craigslist. I went to interview with this guy. He owned a chocolate bar downtown, which was like desserts and fancy drinks and stuff like that. But he had a new location that was fancier, like dessert, like plated plates and martinis and stuff like that. So he was looking for a pastry chef for that location. And I interviewed with him. The two jobs I had before that, I was getting paid, I think 8 something an hour and 7 something an hour at the cafe. So when I got this job and he offered me $10 an hour for a full-time position, I jumped at the chance. But the person I was living with worked at Starbucks and he mentioned something to somebody about my new job and she or he, I don't remember, wrote me a long list of reasons why I shouldn't go to work for this guy on receipt paper from Starbucks. So I didn't heed the warning, I should have, but I think I got the job like in the middle of summertime And the person that I was taking over for kind of trained me on the dishes that were on the menu and stuff like that. But I was promised like, oh yeah, you can figure out, you know, the winter menu and the fall menu and do this and that. The kitchen's yours, and like, you know, be creative and this and that. So I was trying to do that. Like, I was trying to experiment and do different things. And around the same time he hired me, he hired a guy from Culinary Institute of America, I think that's where he graduated from, as a manager to this bakery store. And basically he wasn't much of a manager. He would leave a lot and leave me in charge and leave me to do his job. So I was trying to juggle like being a pastry chef and like doing the orders that were coming in, plus all the prep I had to do, you know, to make the orders, because you got to prep everything ahead of time to make these fancy plates that had like 8 components per each plate. And he would leave if it was like slow enough at like 8 o'clock and leave me to close until 11. Plus I did all the ordering. It was his job to like put the orders through the fax and all that stuff, and I ended up having to do all that. But I did try to come up with like some new menu items for the winter time. Like I had like a chocolate peppermint trio with like mousse and a couple different, you know, desserts on it and elements. And I did like a bananas Foster one and a bunch of different ideas I had, and they were all shot down by the owner. And he ended up telling me like weeks later, like, oh yeah, I'm hiring someone to figure out the new menu. I'm like, okay. And I had already like prepped stuff to like, cause he wanted to taste my menus, you know, and he never showed up for any tastings. He was never really there. I never really saw the owner. And then one day the manager came in, it was like beginning of December, and he fired me. And I'm like, huh? What's going on? And he's like, yeah, the owner doesn't think you're doing enough and it's just not working out. And I'm like, huh? Again, I had no idea. And I filed for unemployment because I'm like, he fired me. And I don't even know why. I was never told I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was working my butt off, doing my job and the manager's job. And I found out a lot later that he was pretty sexist. There was a lot of stories from his other place of him watching cameras and stuff like that. So there was a lot going on. Again, I didn't know of because I was only like 20. But I filed for unemployment. And I got a notice from the whatever bureau saying that his explanation was that I was given several warnings that I wasn't performing up to his standards or something like that. And I'm like, huh? So apparently this manager guy was being told to tell me these things because the owner couldn't do it, of course, but he was too much of a coward to actually tell me these things. So when I did get fired, it was a complete shock to me. So that wasn't very fun before the holidays. So that pastry place is now closed too, along with his chocolate bar that was downtown. You see a theme here? So again, a friend got me a job, or an interview at least, at TGI Fridays as the broil cook. And they offered me $10 an hour, and I said, fine, I'll do it. And I'm like, how different can it be from Bob Evans? It's very different. But it's the same concept. It's just different things I'm cooking. But, you know, Bob Evans was more breakfast food and this was more steak and ribs and stuff like that. But I did that for a while. I wasn't even there a year, but that's because the friend that got me the job was like, let's move downtown together, because we were both living at home at the time. And I'm like, okay, cool. We'll find an apartment downtown and we'll both get jobs downtown. That way we don't have to commute and we'll just be able to like walk to work. We ended up moving downtown, and within a month, another friend called me from culinary class in high school and was like, hey, I'm the chef over at this lounge and I need someone in the kitchen that I want to work with and that I know is a good worker and will work well together. He said, will you come work here, meet the owner, have a little interview, and all that? And I said, sure. So I went on the interview. They offered me $10 an hour. I said yes, because I'm stupid and didn't know my worth at all. As I got older, I realized that I should be asking for more money than the previous job I had. But I was just happy to get out of that job, you know, at Fridays. Because Fridays, that was an easier job. It's like I didn't have to manage anything. It still sucked. I mean, be thankful for those people that work super busy Friday and Saturday nights at your favorite restaurants, because it is hard and hot. and craziness. But I did a lot of the lunch prep and working lunch at Fridays, and I enjoyed the prep work. Like, I was good at it and I was able to get it done pretty fast. So much so that they asked me to stay on a couple of times a week to do prep in the mornings. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be working 4 to midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not gonna be able to work, 12 to 4 or anything like that for you. So I told them, sorry, I couldn't help, but I went to work for a bar lounge that wanted to break more into like fine dining, or like at least more than just like pub food kind of thing. So he hired my friend to kind of redo a menu, and we would do a specials menu every week and come up with new dishes, and it was really fun. I loved working with my friend. He's one of my 2 best friends that I have, but it was fun for a while and I enjoyed it. But I was also, I just turned 21, I think. Might have been 22, turning 22 at the time. And to say they poured drinks freely a lot of times, and the patrons that were friends of the owner would come in all the time and give us drinks and this and that. So it was a lot of late nights, and I wasn't in the best of health, for sure. It was a fun job to have until my friend left for a better job, and he was getting paid more than me hourly. Plus he was getting paid under the books 2 days a week. So he was making a ton more than me, and they wouldn't do the same for me once he left. And I ran the kitchen at this bar and lounge. I took over the ordering. I picked up produce every day pretty much. I had to fax in orders to the restaurant store, everything. I had to do it all. I was running the kitchen, and I think they gave me like 50 cents raise. Like, I think I was making like $11 when he left, but they couldn't pay me off the books like they were doing with my friend. So that was the first red flag. And then I'm like, well, I need help in the kitchen. I need someone who knows what they're doing. And they hired this guy, and it was rough. I can't even explain it. He couldn't even make a flatbread correctly. And oh no, he's good, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he was a cool guy and all, but he sucked at cooking. We weren't even that busy. The most tickets we'd have at a time was like 5, 6 tickets. And he couldn't even keep anything straight. We didn't work good in the kitchen together. It just didn't work. And so I finally was like, if they're not gonna listen to me about this guy, I gotta look for something else. So I ended up interviewing for a job down the road at a hotel, and hired me as a second cook, and I got paid a little bit more than I was making at the lounge. I think they started me at $13 an hour, and then eventually I became first cook, which is just under the sous chef. And I was stuck there for like 2 more years, watching sous chef after morning sous chef come and go over and over and over again. And every time someone got fired or left, I was like, they're gonna put me in for the sous chef position, because I was doing it when there was no sous chef. I was doing the job. Every time I got screwed over and they hired a guy. They never hired a woman sous chef off the street, a chef. I was there doing the work already, and it was very frustrating. And finally, I started looking for another job, because I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I spent 3 years there. And I went from second cook to first cook within the first couple of months. They realized I knew what I was doing and I could do the job. But once I started looking for another job, just like Snooty Fox, they started offering me more money as soon as I left, and they realized how bad that cook was. They're like, will you come back? Will you help us out? It's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I have a new job. The same thing happened at the hotel. As soon as I said I was leaving, they're like, oh, we were gonna offer you the sous chef position at, it was something like $28,000 a year. I'm like, I make more with my overtime than $28,000. And you want to put me on salary for $28,000? No. And they hired the guy that had only been there a couple of months to be the sous chef. So I left and went to work at the country club, which is the last job I had before the bakery. Finally, I got a good chef that, went to bat for me. And he hired me as a banquet chef. And then not long after, he hired me as the sous chef, and I got a raise. And I was a sous chef for 6 years. So I was there from November of 2014 to the spring of 2022. And I liked it there, but I had started YouTube in 2020 during the pandemic. And At the club, I was on break for 2 months out of the year. So February and March. So I found keto in January, and then February and March we were off, and we went on a trip to North Carolina at like the end of March when we were supposed to get back to work by like the 26th of March. And that's when news started to hit. Apparently it was earlier than that, but we were camping in the woods, so we didn't really hear anything about it until we went to visit Adam's uncle in Asheville, and it was all over the news and everything. So then we were like, do we stay here? Do we drive home? Like, what do we do? It was craziness. So we ended up leaving there and going back home, and from then on we were locked down until like, I think we went back at like the end of June maybe of 2020, and it was only like takeout. It wasn't like sit down restaurants or anything like that. We all had to wear masks, all that stuff. But I got really big into keto, like, you know, while we were on break there. And in April 2020 is when I put up my first YouTube video, because I got really sick of trying ice cream recipes and they were all gross, especially the mason jar ice cream. And I wanted to figure out the best keto ice cream. So I started experimenting on that, and I figured out my vanilla ice cream recipe, which I have since updated since that first video, but that's still one of my favorite recipes, and I love my ice cream, so like I made a million recipes spun off that. But in 2020, we went back to work. I was still doing YouTube. I put up a video every week until January of 2022, and I had gotten monetized in October of 2021. So I finally started making money. I was gaining momentum. I found out later that YouTube really pushes new creators more than, you know, ones that have been around for a while or taken long breaks and stuff like that. I didn't know any of this, so really I should have probably planned ahead. Although I didn't know what was going to happen, so I don't know if I could have really. Maybe if I would have worked a little bit smarter and had backlog. But again, I was working 40 to 60 hours a week as a sous chef at a country club. So it was hard for me to do anything extra, you know, for YouTube. So in 2022, I put out my low carb bread video, which has like 250,000 views. That's like what really like gave me a lot of momentum. But then Adam proposed. I decided in November we were gonna get married March 2022, where we were supposed to be off from the club. We were looking for like parks to get married in, but cabins were booked already for like the next winter. So we decided to have it at the club, but originally I picked our March 20th because the club is usually closed. Well, that was the first year that they decided to stay open all year round. And that was a big hiccup in the whole thing, especially when in February, my chef told me he was leaving the club. And that sent me into panic mode because I'm planning my entire wedding, which is at the club, and now I have to be the executive chef. Plus, I'm making my own wedding cake. There was so much that I had to do. And there was no way I could keep up on YouTube and figure it out while I was figuring out how to be an executive chef for a club. Like, I had to do the inventories, I had to do all the ordering, I had to hire people, fire people, like interview people, everything. And they were interviewing executive chefs to take over. They ended up hiring someone that was in North Carolina and coming back to Buffalo, not until like April. So like February and March, all through my wedding, I was working as the executive chef at a club. There was no way I was able to put up YouTube videos. So my viewership crashed, basically, because I didn't get back into making videos until May. I ended up putting in my resignation after my wedding because I got an opportunity to start a keto gluten-free bakery with somebody. And I jumped at the opportunity when I really should have looked into her more, but it's in the past. I'm not gonna dwell on it. But I saw that as my out because I didn't want to work there anymore, and I wanted to do something that was helping people instead of just feeding rich people. Like, I wanted meaning to my life in general. And with my keto baked goods, I thought I could do that. So when the opportunity came, I grabbed it and got to figuring out how to open a bakery and have my own business, because I had never done anything like that. I definitely was always a business person because I always sold things. Like, My mom always said I was a kid, I always had the lemonade stand, I sold cakes out of my Easy Bake Oven, I sold bracelets, like any kind of arts and crafts I could do, like I was always selling things. So it was just figuring out the way you're supposed to do it legally that I had to figure out. And the person that reached out to me, I thought would be a good resource for that, but it turned out she was from Canada and didn't know a lot of the things that she needed to know to run businesses in the States. And she didn't run her bakery anyway how I would run a bakery. And I found out later she was in a lot of money trouble. And we ended up just parting ways when I was 37 weeks. I moved all my stuff out of the bakery because she was trying to sell stuff and sell her part of the bakery and get out of the lease, and she was super far behind on rent and utilities and all this other stuff that I didn't know any of that when I signed any contract, of course. But yeah, that ended pretty badly, and I was pregnant the entire time I had the bakery. Not completely planned, but we didn't prevent, and it happened right away. So I was pregnant the entire time I had the bakery, and with the whole situation, I just said, I'm good. I'll be done. Like the second week in November, I'll be out of here, and haven't really talked to her since. So that brings me to this bakery. The last 5 weeks I was pregnant, because I went 42 weeks, I was home. And before that too, I was working on figuring out all the equipment and everything I needed for this bakery. And yeah, so that's how I ended up in a separate bakery. Like, this used to be the laundry room. We moved the laundry upstairs where we live in our bathroom. And this is now the bakery. Pretty much got rid of everything that was in here, tables and the sink and all that stuff, and put in all new stainless steel and all that stuff. And I'm happy to be doing pastries again full time. When I got into the YouTube thing and figuring out my own recipes, it was basically just my need for delicious pastries, because all the recipes I found online either weren't thorough enough, so maybe it was my fault they didn't come out right, but also their fault because they didn't write a thorough instruction and stuff, or the recipes just weren't good. So I'm happy that I'm able to finally ship to a lot of you, and I hope that the bakery just continues to grow and I'm able to overcome all the obstacles that are thrown at me when it is just me doing all the stuff. Today I spent a lot of time working on my website. I do it all myself. Website editing and the thumbnails and the blog posts and the baking and the shipping and everything. So I hope in the near future I'll have the funds to hire some jobs out to people for sure. I mean, it's all in growing a business. You gotta go slow and steady. If you go too fast, you can plummet real quick. So that's my goal for the next year at least, to just keep building. Hopefully it'll naturally progress to a bigger business. So that is my long story of my career, but I really love what I do. I love figuring out new recipes and helping people. I love seeing all the comments about how I've helped you. And when things get really hard and I just want to give up, I can always go back to a sous chef job or any job in the restaurant business, really. It'd be much easier than trying to figure out all this new stuff on my own. But I love helping people. I always said if I didn't go into culinary, I would have went into social work. I always enjoyed helping the disabled kids in high school. I did that on my free study periods and stuff like that. And I think working in the restaurant business my whole life, it was always just a job and I was good at it. I was good at what I did. It just wasn't fulfilling to me. And I want to end this by saying thank you guys for watching and watching me every week. It helps keep me going, especially all the comments I read, and I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. And I hope to do it for a long time to come. Who knows where I'll be in 5 years, but it'll be fun to look back on this video and maybe do an update. But thank you all for ordering, subscribing, commenting, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Ordering on Amazon, that helps me out a great deal too. I use the gift cards every month to buy either bakery ingredients or stuff for my boy. So I really appreciate that also. And the Patreons. Everybody that has helped me throughout the years, I really appreciate it. But I think that's it. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll be back with more keto, low carb, healthy meals, desserts, and snack recipes. and some life videos and updates. Bye guys. Happy keto baking!